What did the strange kid in your school do to make them so strange? Told everyone his name was Soul Reaper. He was the self-proclaimed gangster emperor and a vampire. He would run around with his forearm over his face like he was shielding himself from the sun with a pretend cape. And he would hide in the shade and hiss at people as they walked by. Sometimes he would charge them when he hissed and chased them away. If they didn't run, he would do his little cape thing and flee back to the shadows. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. In the first grade, the teacher took back our fat beginner pencils and handed out our first big kid pencils, the thin yellow ones with an eraser on the end. We felt so grown up as we carefully stowed our new treasures into our desks and went out for recess. And Weird Kevin snuck back inside and ate the erasers off of each and every one of our new pencils. Yep, that's strange. I wonder how Weird Kevin is doing now. Does he still eat erasers? Why did he do it? So many questions. Story 3. She would have conversations with herself during class, often while the teacher was speaking. One day she showed up and had shaved the front of her hair so that it looked like she had a horrible receding hairline. After a couple of weeks like that, she took to wearing Halloween wigs. She would sometimes talk about her pet flying squirrel and no one believed she actually had one. So she started trying to take him to school with her every so often and would always get into trouble. During lunch, she would sit by herself at a table, pick out a person, and literally mimic their every move for the entire period. Very bizarre. Story 4. While on a school sports trip, we stopped at a Denny's for lunch. He sat at a table by himself and shouted at the waitress to, "Get me another Coke, female dog," like 3 times. He ate his burger so fast that it got stuck in his throat, I think. No biggie, he just pushed it down his throat with a fork, to the horror of other nearby diners. That's just one example. Story 5. 1. When he asked what he would do if he could freeze time, he creepily said that he would use it to assault people. 2. In a discussion between myself and some female friends about the ups and downs of having boobs, he interjected and asked if he could feel one of the girls in his creepy nasal voice. 3. In math class, he would crawl underneath the computer tables, wait for a girl in a skirt to sit down, wait a bit, then crawl out from directly in front of where they were sitting and exclaim, "Nice view." 4. When somebody said his eyebrows touched, he said, "It's called a unibrow, ever heard of it?" in a way that almost suggested he was proud. 5. He would walk up to people and claim that he pleasured himself 10 times a day and it took him 5 seconds to nut. That's 6 minutes a week, 25 minutes a month, and 5 hours a year. For comparison, someone doing it once a day for 7 minutes would total 44 hours a year. He does it 10 times more, but for a tenth of the time. Yeah, we did the math. 6. He was obsessed with getting to class on time. One day, he ran into class like 2 seconds after the bell rung, obviously angry, and threw his stuff down, knocking over books and stuff. When asked what was wrong, he yelled that the teacher kept him 2 minutes late after class, and now he was late. And then he started crying. 7. He was a fast runner and constantly bragged about it. This wasn't weird, just annoying. TLDR, creepy nasal unibrow kid perved on girls, wanted to assault people, and cried when late to class. Edit. People have asked for more stories, so here you go. One day, a teacher was talking to our class about kids being reckless. She told us the story of her daughter's friend who played Russian roulette and then died, and how his funeral was this Saturday. The kid raised his hand and asked if the guy actually died while stifling a laugh. When the teacher replied yes, kid bursts out laughing for a solid 2 to 3 seconds. Another edit. 4 more stories. Okay, so most of these stories occur in 8th or 9th grade. This story was late 8th, so word got around that this kid wanted to unalive himself. Whether he was actually thinking of it or not, I don't know, but I think his lack of ability to connect with people socially made him unhappy. Well, one day the class gets together to make him a giant card or poster thing telling him how much we love him so he wouldn't unalive himself. So a group of kids in our math class stays during lunch to make this poster. Apparently, no one informed me, so I walk in and everyone's like, "We love you, blank." And I see the card and I'm weirded out. And I keep asking people if it was his birthday or something, and everyone keeps telling me to shut up. Eventually, I figured it out. One thing that upset me, though, was that my GF at the time was one of the people who worked on the card, and she wrote, "You're better than HP," my initials, on the card, and signed her name, which felt weird and unnecessary to me, especially as this was pretty early in our relationship. Anyway, kid was pretty weird about it, but he seemed to like the attention, even if he wouldn't admit it. For 2 solid weeks, he went around giving people tiny cards like the one he got, claiming he wasn't in need of a card any more than anyone else. That last bit sounds kinda sweet, actually. This kid has some issues, for sure, but that last bit shows, in my mind, a good heart. so I hope he got his stuff together. Story 6. She used to talk about how her brother took advantage of her. No one was certain if it was true or not. She was a special needs girl who would say outlandish things, but then turn around and laugh about whatever she said. It was really uncomfortable because we couldn't tell if she was screwed up from being assaulted or was just screwed up and liked the attention. Edit, just to clarify a few things since I've gotten a lot of messages. She was very high functioning, and I'm honestly not sure what disability she had. I just knew she was in the special education classes. While I obviously can't say for sure, it appeared that she was saying it for shock value. She would do things like walk over to someone's lunch table and yell, "My brother assaulted me," and then cackle loudly. She would do it in front of teachers too. She'd say other things that were weird, but the assault one was what stuck with me. We didn't report it, but it was widely known throughout the school that she would say these things. I don't think we ever said anything because we were young, and then eventually it kind of became normal. We just kind of brushed it off like, oh, that's just whatever. It lasted from late elementary school until early high school when she eventually stopped. I sincerely hope that it didn't happen and she was just saying it for attention, but yeah, that was real weird. Story 7. Combined all of his lunch food into a single pile, ate it like a miner looking for valuable ore, while using every condiment the school provided. I can never forget one time he added corn, green beans, hot sauce, mayo, mustard, relish, and a roll, it's been 20 years or so, I may not be 100% accurate, to his pizza. Just started gobbling away like every other day that ends in Y. I happen to be looking right at him, see him pause, stare straight ahead, not at me, just into nowhere, for an awkward 5 seconds. Leans over and pukes all over the walkway between tables. He sits right back up, and with the same awkwardness as before, he continues staring into space. Just as the janitor arrives to spread wood dust or whatever it is on the puke, the kid starts eating the amassed pile of food he has collected again. The janitor's face while he cleaned the puke right next to the kid who puked it up I will always remember. It was clearly and non-verbally said that this kid has some serious issues. The kid continued to eat the amalgamation of food and stare into space as the janitor just cleaned it up, clearly thinking he was not paid enough to do this. They never are. Story 8. He would have conversations with himself under his breath like Gollum. In the middle of these rage-filled arguments, he would pull out his handgun and shoot people in the class. All our teachers ever said was, "Hey, no guns." He also made notes that we would occasionally find. One specifically on why the person who sat behind him in math class deserved to die. But then he found Facebook and other online communities and seems to have calmed down a bit. Calmed down or just found a different outlet for his craziness. This is weird behavior, but it's hard to make any judgment calls on kids because kids do all sorts of weird things. So who knows, it might just be fine. Story 9. I was in the advanced class. Humble brag, I know, but it explains the weirdos a bit. In elementary school, and they kept us away from the normal kids. Great for social development. Some of the kids didn't adjust as well as others. One loved World War II, and would dress up in German uniform and sported a Hitler stash for a while. Now, he was not a Nazi nor racist. I believe he was Korean. He just liked the history. Not saying Koreans can't be racist or anything, one just usually thinks of neo-Nazis as white. Weird guy. Ended up getting shot and unalived by Seattle PD because he was holding a replica World War II gun around an officer. Shame. R.I.P. Miles. Story 10. Went to elementary with a boy who would play with himself under his desk. At least twice a week. He barely hit it and everyone knew. Usually the teacher would try to ignore it, but she often sent him out of the room. He also talked to himself a lot. He was a really smart kid, grew up to be brilliant, but you always had to worry if he was plotting your death under his breath. In high school, there was a girl who wore adult diapers. Not for any legit incontinence, she just liked crapping herself. She almost never spoke, but she told people that she wore them on purpose for that reason. That second one might just be the worst cover story of all time, because hear me out. When you're a kid, you'll get this idea that there's one thing that you can't tell people at all. Like, for this girl, it might have been incontinence. And so she's like, literally any story I make up will be better. So she comes up with the story that she just likes crap. Okay, when I say it out loud, it sounds weird, but for kid logic, I think it could make sense still. Just think about it. Who knows? Story 11. When I was in 7th grade, there was a kid whose last name was Roach. And since he invariably smelled like pungent cat pee, he was called the Roach and teased constantly by most kids at my school. I never spoke to him until I shared a summer school class with him, and he was assigned to me as a partner for a project. After getting to know him better, I realized he was perfectly normal. He liked video games and TV shows, and his only immediately noticeable flaw was his terrible stench. About a week before our presentation was due, he was not in his seat in class. The teacher informs us he drowned in a canal over the weekend. I was shocked, mainly because I had seen him just a few days earlier. I felt especially horrible when kids I knew started joking about how he finally took a bath. I lost a couple of friends for yelling at them about how they were awful people and how he was a nice guy. My only regret is that I didn't speak to him sooner. He could have used a friend during the short time he was there. Rest in peace, Andrew Rocha. Story 12. There was a girl in my high school named Annie. I got sat next to her in my junior year English class. Everything seemed cool at first. Maybe she was a little awkward, but nothing terrible. Then the teacher had us pair up and make posters listing all of the IB profile traits. It's like AP except not. And she forgot the second I in the word inquirer. When I pointed it out, she froze, staring at the poster. "No," she finally said very aggressively. "There isn't one." A dark red hue began to slowly crawl up her neck. I pointed at the poster next to us. "No, there is. No big deal. There's space between the two letters to squeeze it in." She's staring at me now. Her face was a horrible crimson and the veins on her temple began to stand out. I started to panic a little. What do I do here? I mean, we don't have to. It's not like this assignment matters, I said dismissively, hoping she would cool down. Nope. She grabs the poster and crumples it in her hand, not looking away from me. "It matters!" she screams, spit hitting my face. She slams her fist down on the desk, whips around, tears up the paper poster, and beelines for the door. Everyone is staring now, and she runs into a chair, slamming her shin into the seat and stumbling over it. Finally, she makes it to the door and screams repeatedly in the hallway. I quickly find out this is a weekly occurrence for her. Everyone had a story of her crying in class or screaming at people for insignificant reasons. Unfortunately, this was only the first day of a horrible year ahead, sitting next to Annie in English. Story 13. I was torn between listing all the weird and disturbing crap I did because I was definitely the weirdest kid at school, but I'm lazy and the list is too big. So I'll point out the strangest thing I ever saw another person do that earned them that reputation. We were in college and a friend was a manager of a movie theater. We would go there to watch private movies late at night. We had all been cast in a play, and for our cast party, we went for a movie. One of the guys who seemed a little socially awkward went into the theater and proceeded to pick up any abandoned sodas he found and drank them. Keep in mind, my manager friend had offered everyone free sodas before the movie. Even if his intention was to make a tiny dent in the wasteful nature of American consumerism, he could have been drinking some horrible disease. None of my friends knew what to do except just remind him he could have had a free soda. He kept insisting he was fine and continued drinking his Dr. Herpes and meningitis dew. For some reason, of all the strange stuff, this one is the weirdest to me because it's just benign enough. Like, it's just calm enough and feasible enough where you're like, this person clearly doesn't have screws loose or anything. This is just a decision they made, and it's really weird. The wordplay about the drink names, though, ooh, I gotta appreciate that. Those were nice. Good work, OP. Story 14. He dragged a crusty old mattress that had rusted springs coming out at the seams, offering various girls a deluxe massage. Our high school campus was very segmented, so getting to class often required walking outdoors. He would drag that twin-sized lice-mobile to each building, peddling his wares to anyone who had a B cup or above. Obviously, no one took him up on the offer, and the administration eventually made him ditch it at the dumpster he probably originally got it from. He also had other weird, mating rituals. Like the time he brought a deck of tarot cards and offered to give fortunes to the lovely ladies of our high school. He outright refused to read guys' fortunes. I think he must have bought like 50 packs or something because he rigged it so that the two lovers would always be the card that got picked. I think that was just an elaborate setup for the oh-so-clever one-liner he would prepare for the poor girl who would pity him enough to have her doom portended. Looks like we're fated to be lovers. Ugh. He was just really desperate for female attention. He didn't seem mentally handicapped, just socially and emotionally awkward. There were a bunch of other eerie and cringy things that he would do that I've tried really hard to forget. Story 15. Thought she was a horse. Would run around the halls on calloused knuckles and only communicate through whinny. She later went on to use her hair as a weapon, using a move called the helicopter. She whipped people with her ridiculously long braid. Was almost expelled for writing questionable notes to students with the teacher's signature, and covering her face in lead powder from sharpened pencils. I'm doing fine now. OP, if this really is about you, you are insanely brave for saying this. The FBI could never get this out of me. No way. Story 16. One of my best friends used to sprint everywhere. People would almost stop right after each bell and see him hauling butt around the school. He did other weird things, but that one drew the most notice. His third period was upstairs, and one day at full speed, he missed the next to top step at full speed on his way downstairs towards lunch. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen someone fall down 2 flights of stairs at hyperspeed, but god damn. It will put a smile on your face that would make the Joker proud, right up until it hits you that they're in a ton of pain. He didn't suffer a serious injury, but he did have a limp for like 3 weeks. This feels like something I could have done, to be honest. Going fast is just fun, I get it. Also, falling down happens. 2 flights of stairs? That's impressive. That is some kid invincibility there to not be more injured. Story 17. One day I looked over just in time to see the weirdo lick her shoulder. She looked up and made eye contact. I watched as she stared at me for a moment, slowly raised her hand to her face, and licked it. This was in high school, and I had just finished a test, so I got up, turned it in, and went to the bathroom. She followed me into the boys' bathroom. I must have already been taking a leak when she walked in because I didn't even notice her. She was usually really quiet, but could raise a bit of a ruckus when she wanted to, until I zipped up and turned around. There was a box up against the wall behind me, and she was squatting in it, taking a nasty dump. Normally, she ate the chicken provided in the cafeteria, but I had seen her eating seafood lately, and it was apparently really screwing up her system because it smelled nasty. It was like a mix of rotten eggs and gasoline, and maybe a bit of shrimp that had been left out in the sun for hours. To top it off, she immediately locked eyes with me and followed me with her gaze as I left the bathroom. I wondered what she planned on using to wipe her butt. Then I realized she probably wasn't going to. Disgusting. I went back and sat at my desk. A few minutes later, she walked in like nothing weird had just happened. I thought she was going to sit back down to where she was before, but nope. She came over to me, climbed up on my desk, and curled up into a fluffy ball on my test notes. For the 1000th time, I wish I wasn't homeschooled. Now, if you're gonna write a non-serious response to a post like this, with a little bit of truth in it still, OP just did a masterclass. Are you kidding me? That reveal at the end, ooh, beautiful. Would make the greatest screenwriters in the world proud. I was locked in too because this sounded like it could have happened as well. But no, it was just a cat. Maybe I probably should have picked up on it sooner, and I'm sure some of you did and are gonna call me an idiot. But still, I thought it was good. Story 18. I had a guy who honestly wasn't that weird, but he would always fall asleep in class, and people would make fun of him because his head would bob up and down as he went in and out of consciousness. Later in the year, he invited a friend of mine and I to his birthday party. I ended up getting forced to go by my parents and expected the worst. Imagine my surprise when we ended up going to Dave & Buster's and had a blast. His family was super nice and gave us game cards with unlimited tokens. After that, I felt really bad about the way he was treated in school. He didn't deserve it. This is kind of the reason why I think, unless there's a really good reason, parents forcing their children to go to other children's birthday parties can sometimes be good. Sometimes a kid is outcast for no good reason at all in a school setting. It just happens. And I'm sure parents are just thinking, well, what if this was my kid? I don't want no one to show up to my kid's birthday party, so I'm going to make my kid go to theirs. And sure, sometimes the kid that they're going to is a bully or sucks for reasons. It has to be, case-by-case basis. But sometimes if they just think the kid is kind of weird and can't have a good reason, maybe make them go. I don't know. Story 19. One night I am listening to Loveline and this kid calls in. He goes by the name of Raider, which happens to be the last name of a kid in my algebra class. And he immediately says to Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla, "I think about my mom and sister when I touch myself." And it was definitely this kid's voice from my class. The next day, I told a friend who immediately turned to Raider and says, "Dude, was that you on Loveline last night? 'Cause that's freaking gross." And Raider just looks at him, then me, then him, and gets this creepy, slow, but massive grin on his face, and starts an evil-sounding giggle.